Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Papano from FiberLink Communications. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Based on the number of folks who registered and are attending, it looks like it's a pretty popular topic. So we're going to talk today about some best practices for building apps for iPhones and iPads, so basically apps for iOS devices. We've got Ryan Hope and Sumeet Singh from our development team here at FiberLink. So Ryan and Sumeet are the guys who build the code. So you've got real experts who are building the MDM apps that are part of MAS 360. So please feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll try to hit questions kind of via chat or the Q&A panel, kind of if it makes sense as they come in, but we'll certainly leave some time at the end for Q&A. As usual, we'll run some polls along the way. So a couple quick things. John Harrington's going to push out a link in a minute via the chat panel that will let you continue the conversation with us via Twitter. So you can click on that link. You can certainly get answers to questions. We're manning it right now. Suggest future topics. Share your thoughts with us, and certainly pass it on to others. So thanks for that. We're going to run our first poll right now, and we thought we'd start with a poll, and then I'll hand it over to Ryan. So the poll is simply this. It should pop up for you in a second. What are you planning to do, or your organization planning to do right now for developing iOS apps? So while you're kind of answering back, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan and get started. So Ryan, thanks for joining today. Sumeet, thanks for joining as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I wanted to first set it up here with what it is that you're going to learn today, what we're going to try and present. So we'll be learning about different types of iOS applications that you can develop. We're going to learn about web applications, native applications, and hybrid applications, and sort of the differences, benefits, drawbacks, and when you would typically use each of those. We're going to focus a little bit on developing native apps in the enterprise and some of the challenges that you may face there, and some of the best practices that we have learned over our time developing applications. We'll talk briefly about a new type of app development platform that's used in the enterprise, MEEPs. And then in the end, we will walk through a couple of interesting iOS features. Sumeet and I will be kind of tag teaming this one, so he'll be taking some of the presentation, and I'll be taking some of the other one. So
the results are in. I think, John, did you publish them out? Okay, so kind of the bottom line here is about 2/3 of the folks on the webinar are planning or have built iOS apps. So it's clearly a direction that lots of companies are either doing or planning to do in the near future. So it sounds like it's a pretty timely topic.
Okay. Just to sort of set expectations here for what type of presentation we're going to be giving here, we wanted to make this relevant for developers, so hopefully there'll be a good amount of development-centric information in here. But we also wanted to make sure that it is at a high enough level that folks who are not developers could also get significant benefit out of this. Product managers or product managers who just want to learn a little bit more, this should be perfectly fine for you as well if you're on the topic here. One thing you won't see here today is code snippets. Nothing in this presentation will actually compile. So that's just going to set expectations as far as kind of what we're going to be covering here today.
So we're going to kind of run our next poll now. What we're interested in is, so 2/3 of you are either building or thinking about building apps. Who are you thinking about building them for? Is it your customers, your internal teams, partners, suppliers, or are you building some kind of consumer-focused app to kind of market your company or your products or services? So we'll share the results in a minute with you.
Okay, so getting back to the first type of application that we're going to talk about here today. The first type of application is a web app. As you can tell by the name, a web app is essentially a website or a web application that sits out on a set of servers, and then you can, within iOS, create a link called a web clip that goes out to that application. So it's basically, the web clip sits on your home screen, and when you click on it, it displays the web page that's at whatever the URL is that you've stuck into this thing. It's basically a shortcut to get to the web application. But one of the things that you can do is make these websites very complex. You can use HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript technologies to make the app look like it's a native app. In some cases, folks won't even realize that this is a native app versus a web application. It looks very much like it's an iOS native application built for the iPad or the iPhone that you're working on. It has the capability, you can launch it in full screen mode as well. So it doesn't even look as if you're using a browser to do this, but you do it as part of a browser. So some of the benefits of web apps, if you build them using HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, they can be cross-platform. So you can build them once and run them on not only iOS devices, but also on desktops, or you can run them on other type of form factors as well. Another benefit is, since this is essentially a website that you're viewing on your phone or your tablet, the content is always fresh. So if you want to publish a new set of content or even a new application functionality, you put it up on your web server, and instantly everybody who's using your web app is going to have the most recent version. So from an upgrade perspective, that makes things very nice.
Ryan, quick question.
Yep.
So one thing that came in is you've mentioned iOS a couple times, so people are just asking for a quick definition of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. iOS is the name of the operating system that runs on iPhones and iPads. That's the iOS is what that's called.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so we were talking about some of the benefits of web applications. Content and really functionality can be fresh. The moment you publish it, it can be right there. The other big benefit here is that there's a large developer community with widely available skills. HTML, web skills are a widely available skill set, so that makes it nice from a developer perspective as well. Some of the drawbacks with web applications, performance can be an issue depending on exactly how you do this, but when you write a web application, they're just not quite as snappy as they might be with a native application. Earlier, it used to be that hardware acceleration was not available to web apps. That's changed with iOS 5, with the most recent version of the Apple operating system. That's changed. That there are some hardware acceleration capabilities available through Safari. So it's a little bit different, but still, web apps are not typically as snappy as some of the native applications. Installation can also be a drawback. It's very easy for an individual to create a link on their home screen to go out to a web URL, but there's no sort of built-in mechanism for you to publish your applications. I mean, you could send an email and tell somebody, click on this link and get a pin to your home screen, but there's not something like the App Store, which there's with native applications. So one of the typical places that you would use these type of applications are content-rich applications. E-readers, so as an example, Amazon Kindle's Cloud Reader is built as a web application, and that's one that you could see would be very beneficial because anytime some new content is published, it's automatically updated in the web application. One of the things to be a little bit careful about, though, with web applications, and this really applies in general, but specifically to iOS web applications, is the cross-platform capabilities are great, but not all. You have to be aware that not all browsers are going to support these cross-platform capabilities in a uniform way. A great example of that is something Sumeet is going to talk about in a little bit. That with iOS 5 or with HTML5, there are some capabilities to store locally content. Something called Web SQL, and there's another competing standard called IndexedDB. These two standards are great, except that they're not supported equally across all browsers. Web SQL is supported on iOS devices. It was Apple originally created this standard. It's basically a SQL-like database that's stored in your browser. Google, with Chrome, has also implemented Web SQL, but there's a competing standard, IndexedDB, that's available from Microsoft. It was actually started by Mozilla. Mozilla proposed the standard. And so we've had that experience here. We wrote a web application and thought we would just be able to port it to all different sorts of platforms. We wrote originally for web or for iOS, for Android, or for iPhones and iPads. Thought we'd be able to port it over to all the other platforms that we would support here at MAS 360. And it turns out that when we went to look at the details, it wasn't. So you do have to be a little bit careful about cross-platform capabilities if you're looking for that as well. Okay. So I think this one, Sumeet, I'll hand it over to you, and you can go into kind of some of the details around web applications.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. So now that we have looked at various pros and cons of web applications, let's take an inside look into how they are built. There are a few things that are worth exploring in a web app. They are primarily built using Web 3.0 technologies, HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. Persistence is the first thing that comes in mind. That's something that has improved quite a bit now. There are three primary modes of persistence. The first one is web storage, which is kind of an improvement over cookies, and you have two modes available here, local and session storage. This is really a key value storage mechanism. Web SQL was a long-standing requirement or need in HTML spec, and with Web SQL we have one of the standards where you can persist. You get a database really for you. It's a SQLite database where if you have complex persistent needs, you could definitely use that. As Ryan mentioned, Web SQL is not a standard which is implemented on all the browsers, so you have to be a little careful about that. It's available on WebKit-based browsers only. The last one in persistence is offline application cache capability, which helps you create an application cache so that your application can be used even while a user is offline. So these are the three things that you should explore in persistence. You do have touch events now, using which your application can interact with user using touch events. You also have geolocation capabilities where your application can get access to users' locations, and you can present location-specific content to a user. One thing to be careful about, again, as Ryan mentioned, is that HTML5 is an evolving standard, so you don't have all the features available uniformly across all the browsers. So if you intend to build a cross-platform web application, which I think in most cases you would, you should make sure that the feature you intend to use is available across all different browsers. And there are sites which give you a very good matrix of all the features versus browser support.
Hey, Sumeet.
Yep.
I think a question kind of came in while you were kind of hitting this point on persistence that I think you answered, which was, is it possible to write a web-based app that saves data locally in the event that a wireless connection isn't available, and then upload the data later when there is a connection?
Yep.
Okay, and that's exactly what persistence does for you, correct?
Yep, exactly. Yep. In fact, ft.com, one of my favorite web apps, is something that you should go and look out for in terms of capabilities. You can browse that app. It basically caches the summary of your news, and I think it doesn't cache images because that might be heavy, but it does cache summary of all the articles, and you can browse the articles while you're offline. And then once you come out online, you can just click on the refresh button, and then it refreshes the content. Right. So coming back to the evolving standards of HTML5, you should always code for based on feature detection, and do not have any conditionals based on platform or browser version. So coming to UI frameworks, there are plenty of UI frameworks. I'll mention 3 of them, which are, I think, almost all of the web developers I've spoken to, they know about it and they have used it extensively. JQ Touch is the first one. It's a very lightweight framework. You should definitely check that out. It gives you basic UI controls like animations, callbacks, Ajax, and built-in touch events. jQuery Mobile is another lightweight framework that you should look at. Sencha Touch is a very comprehensive library which can be heavy, but you can also kind of reduce the size if you don't want by removing the unused components. Coming to installation, installing a web app is pretty straightforward. You just have to, you can either push it via a web clip, or you can install the web clip by visiting the app's website and then just click on home, add to home screen, and you'll see a a web clip image on your home screen, and clicking on that will start the app in its own sort of browser sandbox. So
okay. Thank you, Sumeet. Okay, so next type of application we're going to talk about, we've mentioned these a little bit in passing already, are native applications. So what are native applications? They are applications built specifically for iOS, for the iPhone or iPad. Typically they're written in Objective-C. They would be, the IDE that you would use to develop this is something called Xcode. And you'd use the iOS SDK. It was formerly known as the iPhone SDK. I think got switched over a little while ago to be called the iOS SDK. You typically develop on a Mac. I believe you are able to develop on a Windows PC if you'd like, with an extra license. However, the vast majority of folks who develop here develop on Macs.
So at FiberLink, most of our iOS developers use Macs, or all
of them? At FiberLink, all of ours exclusively do, but I do know that there are capabilities to do it not on a Mac as well.
Okay.
So some of the benefits that you get from using a native application, some of the benefits is you get access to hardware, so camera, accelerometer, address book. Performance is usually snappier, as I mentioned previously. You get hardware acceleration. Now with iOS 5, Safari does get some hardware acceleration as well, so that's not quite as big a gap as it used to be, but performance is certainly a benefit that you get here. In addition, you get something called push notifications. Now, Sumeet is going to go into more detail later on exactly how push notifications are and what they are. But they're essentially a way to notify your application from a server that either there are messages available. So let's say it's a badge that comes up that says you have 5 new email messages. It'd be a light day, I guess, right? Or there's a new instant message that has come up, so you get these push notifications. And then another nice thing can be that, especially if you're developing applications for the general public, the built-in marketing of the App Store. Kind of the vast majority of the applications you'd see in the App Store are these types of native applications. Some of the drawbacks, these guys are not cross-platform. So you're developing in Objective-C with the iOS SDK, you really can't use these across a wide variety of platforms if that's something that you're interested in. And it's a relatively specific developer skill set as compared to web applications. Now there are plenty of iOS developers out there, but in terms of comparing it to iOS or to web applications, it is a little bit more specific developer skill set. Typical applications are most of the ones that you would have used and kind of been familiar with.
So most of the apps you see up at the iTunes App Store are native apps.
Most of them are native applications.
Not web apps.
Yep. And I think when Sumeet was mentioning the SDKs that you have available in web applications to make them look like they run in full screen mode and look like they have controls that are just like kind of very native looking ones, well, you don't have that problem here because these are native applications. So the UI controls that you use are exactly that.
It's going to look the way iOS apps look.
It's not going to look like them. It's going to be them. This is kind of what you typically think of as an iOS app. Yeah. Okay, Sumeet, hand it off to you here.
All right. Yep. So now we are ready to develop native apps. So let's look at what are the things that, or what's the groundwork that you need to do to be able to start building those. The first thing that you need is obviously a developer account. And there are two kinds of accounts based on what is your target audience. If you want to develop app for app stores, then you have to buy iOS developer program. That's $99 per year. And if you intend to build applications for your enterprise, you have to buy iOS Enterprise Developer Program, and that is for $300 per year, and you do need your company's DUNS ID for enrolling. So once you have that, you will have access to what's called iOS Provisioning Portal. This is the portal which gives access to a lot of artifacts that you need to be able to start app development. In the beginning, it can be slightly confusing because there are a few terms that would be probably new to you. There's something called provisioning profiles. There are different certificates that you have to install, and then obviously there's devices and applications that you'll have to create in the portal first, and then start using those IDs in your program. So once you get used to the basic concepts which are given in the portal, and portal does have provisioning portal does have a good help around all these constructs, you will be ready to develop apps in no time. Once you move beyond that, you obviously need Mac, as Ryan said. I would say it's most productive to be on Mac to develop applications on iOS. And you need skill sets like Objective-C. You should know Objective-C. Xcode is a de facto IDE, and you need to install iOS SDK, which comes along with the Xcode install. So once you have that, you'll get plenty of examples in the Apple development documentation. There'll be enough sample apps which will expose you to all the different kinds of UI controls and basic constructs. So you should definitely check them out. After that, I would highly recommend for you to review App Store review guidelines for folks who want to develop apps for App Store, and also read iOS human interface guidelines. The next
before we move on, I'd really like to underscore that point as well. We had our own sort of scar tissue getting applications into the App Store. So let me really stress that. Make sure you read the App Store guidelines and the iOS human interface guidelines very carefully when you're doing this.
Yeah, and each and every, I would say, don't skip any section, any point there. Read each and every point carefully.
Yeah, very carefully.
Yep.
So,
all right.
So the good news is everything you need to know is right there. All you need to do is just follow it precisely.
Yes.
So that's a good tip, right?
Yeah.
So read that before you write any code.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right. Then you need to know about different kinds of builds. As you develop your first prototype, what you would build is something called a developer build. That's really meant for installing the application on developers' test devices. You then progress to something called an ad hoc build, which is when your application is ready to be deployed on a bunch of testers or your test group. To create that test group, you need to add the device details of those test devices in the provisioning portal. There's a section called devices, and there's a maximum limit of 100 devices per developer account. So once you add the devices there, you can build apps and test on those devices using something called an ad hoc build. Once you are past the testing phase and you are ready for a mass deployment, what you build is something called a distribution build. And this is true for both enterprise and App Store builds or App Store kind of applications. So you ultimately then build a distribution application, and then if you are building it for App Store, you post it to App Store, or if you're building for an enterprise, then you start distributing it in enterprise. Let's talk about testing strategy a little bit. It's highly recommended that you use actual devices for testing, and it's best to use the device that you are targeting your application on. Simulators are good to some extent, but they would not really give you the same device characteristics as the real devices. If you have a requirement of testing your app in different networks, you can try a company called Device Anywhere, which has devices stationed in various countries, and you can leverage their infrastructure to do that kind of testing. One other thing that I would definitely stress is for folks who use location service callbacks, they should definitely look at the battery drain impact of your application, because that is a complaint that a lot of folks hear if your application is location aware.
Hey, Sumeet, can I jump in here for a second? So we've got a couple of questions, actually several questions that have come in on the chat. And I think you answered this, but it's probably worth bringing it out more specifically here. The questions are all around the guidelines that we mentioned in the App Store if you're developing enterprise applications. So the question basically is, if you're developing enterprise applications, do you have to go through the App Store, and do you have to follow those guidelines? I think
you don't have to go through the App Store, but it's a best practice to follow the guidelines. Apple is not going to complain about anything, but most probably your users will. So iOS human interface guideline is really a guideline about how to build compelling, usable applications. So that is something that you should definitely consider while designing the UI of your application.
Yeah,
so Apple won't complain, but your users, your users might complain if you don't follow them. All right. Then let's once your application is well tested, you would definitely want to perform some kind of profiling. And Xcode comes with a tool called Instruments, which help you gauge various application performance metrics like memory and network usage, CPU usage, etc. So you should definitely run a profiling against your application as well. The last thing that I want to touch upon was internationalization. It's something that you should always keep in mind because in most cases you do want to increase the reach of your application. You do want your application to be localized in different languages. And Apple has got a good support, or iOS has got good support for creating localized applications. So you should design your application with this in mind beforehand instead of trying to refactor it later.
Hey, one last thing, because I think there may still be a little bit of confusion about guidelines and apps that are built for employees. Let's try to be kind of very precise. So when we said enterprise apps, we meant specifically apps that have been built for use by your employees. And the rules are, A, you don't need to follow any guidelines at all, although Sumeet stressed that your end users may not be very happy if you don't follow the UI guidelines because it won't look necessarily like the type of iOS app they expect. Number two, the app itself does not need to be in Apple's App Store, which is why you don't need to follow the guidelines, because the guidelines govern whether you're going to be able to be admitted into the App Store, your app will be allowed in the App Store or not. Of course, if it's not in the App Store, then you've got the problem of how do I get the app onto the mobile device. I don't know, Sumeet, are you going to cover that later?
Yeah, we'll cover that in the section for native app in an enterprise.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep, well summarized, Joe. Thanks.
All right, Sumeet, you're ready to move on to hybrid applications?
Yeah.
Nope. And hybrid applications are, as you would imagine, applications that are a cross between web apps and native apps. It's basically a native application that has a web browser control embedded into the application. So you sort of get the best of both worlds here. You get all the native app capabilities that we've talked about, but you get the embedded browser control so that you can, the user interfaces and some of the functionality that you write can be using HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, those technologies that we spoke about before. So you get to leverage maybe expertise in web technologies if that's something that you have in-house, But you also get to leverage, say, push notifications. That's kind of hybrid apps. That's just kind of rounding out the last set of applications that we wanted to talk about today. All right, this seems like the section that everybody's been waiting for. Sumeet, you want to talk about native applications in the enterprise?
Sure. Developing native applications in an enterprise, or just developing applications in an enterprise, it's a different ball game. You have to be careful about few things, especially security, because that's a very big concern for IT folks in enterprise. Your chances are that your application will be audited by a security team before it's deployed on all the execs or all the employees. So we'll just talk about a few best practices. The first one is you should always have user authentication. Apple recommends that. It's one of the best practices for enterprise applications. This is especially important because if a user leaves the company, all you have to do is disable the user's account to be able to remove access to sensitive information if your application provides that. Because there's no other way of kind of enforcing uninstall or forcing an uninstall of the application. So always have some kind of user authentication. The second thing I would like to stress upon is always save your credentials or sensitive information in keychain. Not heavyweight items, but really things like credentials and few keys. If you have any keys that you use in or sensitive strings that you use in your application, so save that in keychain instead of user defaults. I've spoken to a few developers who actually did that and was surprised that they were not using keychain. So we should definitely use that.
And Sumeet, can you just give a short definition of keychain for everybody on the call?
Yeah, keychain is it's basically you can think of it as a vault inside the OS where every application gets its own vault, and in that it can keep its own sensitive information, and no other application can request that information. So you're guaranteed that it's safe for use for your application. And other thing to be careful about is that this vault is not really meant for storing huge data. It's really for things like credentials. Right. The other thing that you should be careful about is you should always use HTTPS instead of HTTP, because obviously HTTPS is more secure. Now let's come to the interesting topic of installation.
Sumeet, before you move on there, I see a question here on the chat that I thought fits in well with the authentication question. The question is whether you can authenticate against Active Directory. So really, Apple doesn't provide a mechanism for doing this authentication. They recommend that you do authentication, but they don't, have a prescribed way to do that necessarily. So there are certainly SDKs, and Mass360, we do provide an SDK if you're using our MDM solution that will allow for user authentication. So to answer the question directly, can you authenticate against Active Directory? Sure, that's a capability that we provide, but it's not as if you configure your application with a checkbox to authenticate against MSAD or an LDAP server or really whatever type of authentication you have. You kind of have to build that capability yourself or use an SDK like Mass360.
Right. On installation, you have two choices. You can have a web-based installation where you host your applications on some web server, and users will kind of look at a catalog and just click on the install button, and the application gets downloaded and installed. That's the first mode. In iOS 5, there has been introduction of few MDM APIs, using which you can have advanced mode of application installs, where you can install applications, remove applications, and also install applications with VPP code. For folks who are not aware of VPP, it's a volume purchase program which helps enterprises buy paid applications for their employees. And the way it works is you buy codes, VPP codes from Apple using an VPP account for the enterprise, and that has unique URLs with the code embedded, and you just send across these URLs to your employees if you have to do this distribution manually. But if you want to leverage MDM APIs, you can very much do that, or that's it it's really scalable if you use MDM APIs, in which case the code gets distributed automatically to your users, and all they have to do is just accept the install prompt. There are SDKs and toolkits available for you to be able to build enterprise apps, and these SDKs meet different purpose. So it's not like you have to use either or. You can use multiple SDKs to suit your need. Like for example, you can have an SDK which gives you access to user authentication, maybe AD authentication, and has auditing usage capability, how many times the app has been used, intimation of updates, etc. So it's highly recommended that you explore what SDKs can be leveraged. And other advantage that you get is using these SDKs, you can kind of standardize on how your enterprise applications are being built, because we know there are customers who build hundreds of enterprise applications, and if there is no sort of uniformity, it's like a nightmare for even auditing, and I think even users as well, because they'll get different user experience.
Thanks, Sumeet. And then I'll talk a little bit about some combo applications and some MDM APIs. So one of the, let's say, limitations of native applications is that there are only a certain set of APIs that are available to that application. And so MDM, for those of you that aren't familiar, mobile device management, that's the platform, the MAS 360, we provide a mobile device management platform. And so one of the things that Apple did with iOS 4 is embedded a small MDM agent into all of the phones and tablets that ship with iOS 4. It's something that they've written, and then they've provided a spec such that you can implement some server APIs. There's a specific set of APIs and certificates that have to be exchanged, and then you can take that MDM agent that's on the phone and sync it up with an MDM implementation. So MAS 360 is an example of that. And so, if you kind of come to our website and sign up for a trial, you can enroll your iOS device with our MDM solution, and then you'll be able to kind of manage things and get more information than you would be able to get with a native app. So a perfect example of that would be software inventory. As part of the iOS SDK, there's no way to tell which applications are installed, when they're installed, that kind of thing. However, in the MDM APIs that Apple has provided, that is one of the things that you would want to do as part of a mobile device management platform, and so we and others have kind of implemented that MDM API. And so what we've been able to do is combine the benefits of that MDM API, the MDM pieces of information you get, along with a native app, such that through the MDM capabilities that we have, we're able to pull software inventory information off of the device, and then potentially take actions based on that in the native application. So maybe you could pop up a badge notification or do other things that are capabilities that are available to native applications. And so one of the other things that you could do is, as an application developer, you could implement your own set of MDM capabilities, or you could leverage an existing MDM capability from somebody like MAS 360. We provide web service APIs that would allow either your native application or maybe the server backend for your native application to access this type of information. Say whether it's software inventory or other types of management capabilities that could be very interesting for an enterprise application. The next topic we wanted to talk about is something called Mobile Enterprise Application Platforms, MEAPs. This is a term that was coined by Gartner in their Magic Quadrant back in 2008. It's basically a suite of services and products to enable application development in an enterprise. Some of the benefits are that these applications that you develop are cross-platform, so the development environment supports a wide variety of handheld devices. Typically, you're programming in higher-level languages, so 4G languages. They're designed really for business applications, and these MEEPs provide easy integration with back-end systems. So say you have, I don't know, an SAP system, some sort of CRM that you'd like to integrate with, and another type of enterprise application. The way these things work is that there's a application you'd write for the device itself, for the end device, and then there's a middleware server, and this application or these sets of applications that live on the device talk to the middleware server. The middleware server then has nice connectors to get back to whether it's your CRM application or SAP or whatever other enterprise data store that you have. So this is really, if you are in a larger organization, they're typically recommended, these mobile enterprise application platforms, they kind of have this rule of 3. So if you want to support 3 or more mobile applications, so maybe a Salesforce application, a manufacturing application, one other type of application. If you support 3 or more mobile operating systems, and if you're integrating with at least 3 back-end data sources, this might be something that you could look into that would ease your enterprise application development. So once you have these things developed, you still have sort of the challenges of getting them deployed. I'm going to mention Mass 360 one more time. We do have the capability to be able to do that. And I also want to point out that it doesn't necessarily have to be that you would use this or one of these mobile enterprise application platforms or some of the other techniques. They could be combined together as well.
Hey, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So it sounds like what you're saying is there are third-party products that are these MEEP products that kind of are built for this purpose.
Yep.
So, okay, that's kind of one thing. I guess the other thing I was going to ask is, as far as you know, do the vendors who make these third-party systems that people want to integrate to, do they provide any mobile APIs of their own?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've got, I don't know, some kind of CRM system, would the vendor of that CRM system have mobile APIs?
Yeah, actually I can. Yeah, yes, Joe, you're right. So they may provide some sort of integration with their own system, like maybe in your case, the case that you were talking about, maybe a CRM system that the vendor provides, and you can build tools or build applications which uses some of the data of the CRM system, and combine it with, let's say, Mass 360 SDK, which uses your data provided by your MDM APIs. Yeah, so you can have a good mishmash of these SDKs.
Okay, so it sounds like there's kind of a couple ways to go here, and if you're a developer and you've got to build an app of this type, you need to understand how you're going to connect back to these enterprise systems. There may be APIs available from the vendor of the system you're trying to connect to. There may be third-party generic APIs that ease the burden of cross-platform development as well as cross-enterprise app connection, I'll call it. And then there's kind of third-party APIs like ours that can add another layer of security or management around the whole thing.
Yep.
All right, super. So we're going to run our last poll. I'm sure, I'll take that back. We've got 4 polls today. So we're going to run our 3rd poll right now, and it's simply this: have you built or do you plan to build cross-platform apps? So we just spent some time talking about that. Obviously, folks along the way here have been asking questions about developing apps either on other host systems or for other target platforms. So we're interested in kind of finding out what you folks are planning to do.
All right, so Sumeet, I think you've got a couple more functionalities that you wanted to touch on. I think you're going to touch on these briefly, sort of in the interest of time here.
Sure.
Push notifications.
We'll quickly touch upon push notifications, location services, and data protection. Push notifications, Ryan gave a great briefing of what these are earlier as well. They can be of 3 types. The notification itself can be of 3 types. The first one is a badge notification, which, like you see our number over here in the top right corner. It can be of a sound, or it can be a message or an alert. So you can send all three of them in one single push notification, or any one of them to a device. There are two kinds of push notifications based on the place they come from or they originate, local and remote notifications. Local notifications are where it's like an alarm clock. Application is a very good example. The app itself can schedule a notification for itself for 4 hours from now. Remote notification is where you have a backend system or you have a backend app server for your application, which can intimate user of some interesting data, like there could be a pending chat message which a server has knowledge of and wants to bring that to attention to a user who is not yet logged into the application. Right? The way you enable push notification, remote push notification on your application is you need to first of all generate an APNS certificate for it, download that, and then use it in your app server. There are various APIs available if you want to write your own app server to send push notification to your application. There's another option to use an outsource app server as well. There is a I think one example is Urban Ship.
How do you spell
Urban
that?
Airship.
Yep. Urban Airship.
Okay.
URBAN Airship.
Yep. They're pretty popular choice in case you don't want to build your own remote push notification framework.
Yeah, and I would highly, highly recommend against building a push notification system. One of the benefits that you get by using the built-in APNS one is that there's a single network connection back to Apple. I don't know if it was clear from what Sumeet said that these APNS push notifications all run through servers at Apple. And there's a single network connection back to Apple for all APNS push notifications from a particular device. Whereas if every different application were to develop its own push notification system, a battery drain would just not work very well. It would have significant impact on the battery, whereas using the built-in push notification system is much more efficient.
Right. Another thing is, I think Apple, if you are planning to put your application in App Store, Apple won't allow you to build your own custom push notification system. You have to use their push notification system.
That kind of seals the deal.
Yeah. Push notifications can be tricky as well sometimes. So there's a section on troubleshooting. You have to be careful about firewall rules. If you are developing an app server, from the server side you need to have access to port 2195 and 2196. And from the device side, where the device connects to, say, Wi-Fi networks, though the 5223 port should be open. You should also check on APNS certificate expiry, because it expires every year, so you have to keep renewing that. In case you want to do some detailed troubleshooting, there is a profile available from Apple which you have to install on devices and restart, and then you will start seeing APNS logging in the device itself. We have used it multiple times, and it really has saved us a lot of trouble. The other thing that you should be careful about is you should not use push notification as a mechanism of sending some sensitive information or information which, because there's no guarantee that a notification will reach the device. So, and also there is no guarantee on the sequence. One other thing that you have to be careful about is that if you send multiple notifications to a device and the device has not yet received them, only the last notification will reach the device. All the previous ones will be ignored. So
that's the final bullet there on missing notifications, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Moving on. Location service is a very interesting feature, but one of the misused feature as well. So you have to be very cautious while developing applications. It can be, if not used properly, it can be a huge battery drain. There are, and you can use it for multiple use cases. It can be used for social networking, or it can be used for navigation services, or you could provide some location-specific content. In terms of different types of location services, the first one is standard. location service, which has been available since I think long time. I think maybe 2.0 or so version of the OS. The standard location service gives you a way to configure the desired accuracy and distance filter, which is when you will get notified whenever that filter has arrived. Like you can say, intimate me or notify me whenever my device crosses, say, 1 mile, and then you will get notified whenever your device moves by a mile. What you have to be careful about here is that you should have as coarse an accuracy as possible, because smaller or high accuracy really means that you'll get a lot more callbacks, and it can be a battery drain. The other type of location service is called significant change service. It's available from iOS 4.0, and it has a very good feature that it does not consume GPS. It solely is based on cellular radio triangulation, and hence it has very low power usage. But of course, it's very coarse because it works on triangulation based on cell towers, which are like can be miles apart. The other interesting thing about significant location service is that it can wake up your application if it is in suspended mode. So if you have a requirement where your application needs to say do something whenever a device moves by a significant distance, you should definitely use this instead of standard location service. The third type of location service is called region monitoring. This is again available from iOS 4.0, and this is also used for a feature called geofencing. Basically, you can define regions, and when a device moves in or goes out of the region, your application will get a callback, and you can react accordingly. And a region is just a coordinate with a specified radius.
So one of the great examples of geofencing is retail stores. Say a retail store wants to have iPads that are just used in the store for whatever purpose, but they'd want to get notified as if an employee were to take one out of the store when they shouldn't be. So you could set up a geofencing area right around your store, and then get notified when when an iPad does go outside of the store.
Yep. Touching upon data protection, starting iPhone 3GS, hardware encryption feature was available in iPhones. With iOS 4, data protection APIs were introduced, and the concept was really that you can tie in encryption state of a device with the passcode. So to enable encryption, you have to enforce passcode on the device. Once the passcode is set, all your APIs kick in. Mail app uses the API. And it's a very straightforward API. It's just one single API that you have to use for file system protection. And there's a similar one for keychain as well. And the concept is that once you write a file using that API or that option, you can ensure that while the device is locked, no one can access the file. So in case you happen to lose your iPhone, you can't just have people connecting the iPhone to their computer and trying to extract information from your application. So you should definitely, and since it's so straightforward, I would highly recommend you use this API. The only caveat is there are a few flavors of the API. One which says that while the iPhone, or while the device is locked, nobody can access the file, not even your application. And in case your application is supposed to run in the background, like let's say it's listening for location callbacks, in that case, if it needs to access the file, it itself won't be able to access it. So you have to be careful about the choices that you make there.
All right, so we're going to run our last poll here. I'm sure you're probably happy to hear that. It's simply this: what platforms do you plan to build apps for? So obviously today's topic was building apps for iPhones and iPads, iOS devices, I guess iPod touches too. But we're also interested in what other what other platforms you may be thinking about building for as well. So while we're kind of waiting for those results to come back in, we'll just spend a minute or two here on MAS 360 itself. So, MAS can help you with managing mobile devices across platforms. So that's iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Phone 7, Windows Mobile, WebOS, Symbian, kind of the whole lot. We can certainly help with protecting and managing mobile devices, both corporate issued as well as employee owned. So that's obviously a big part of what we do, is help corporations responsibly let employees use their personal devices to get access to corporate email, is often the big use case. I'm not going to go through all the details here. So we've got lots of MDM features for managing these devices. If you go to our website, you'll certainly see all those. Network World did an eval of MDM systems last year, middle of last year, last summer, and MAS 360 was in a bake-off against a number of other competing MDM products, and we did win the evaluation that Network World did based on our ease of use. So that's certainly what we think is our key value proposition, is that our platform, MAS 360, is the quickest to deploy, easiest to use mobile device management platform. Again, we're going to ask you to kind of hit that link with our hashtag and continue the conversation with us. We've only got a couple of minutes. We've done this webinar a few times. It always goes a couple minutes long because there's so much information that gets presented. But we tried to cover most of the questions that came in during the webinar. But we will be happy to take a few more now, and if folks want to hang on, we'll maybe go for an extra 5 minutes if there's still some more questions. I know one question that got asked was around some of the rules around enterprise developer accounts at Apple. Is there a cost? Where do you get it? That kind of thing.
Yep. What types of accounts do you need for what types of things that you're trying to do? If you're developing an enterprise account or an enterprise application and you're developing something that goes in the App Store, you will need two different types of accounts. The developer account that you need to post something to the App Store is a developer account that costs $99. You can sign up online. From there, you're able to submit applications to be in the App Store. Submitting them is free, but I believe then Apple takes a share of the revenue. So if your app is free, then there's no more cost to you. There's also no more revenue for you. If you charge something for your application, then payment goes through Apple and they deduct a percentage.
Okay. There's a question about encryption on iOS platforms, which is certainly one of its strengths as a platform, which is, can you pick and choose what apps use encryption and which do not, or is it kind of an all or nothing device level setting?
No, you can use, you can pick and choose. If you want to save data in your app sandbox and encrypt it, because for some reason you don't want to share it with the user itself, there are ways that even if you use the file encryption API that I was mentioning, or sorry, the data encryption API that I was mentioning earlier, if the device is in unencrypted state, a user can kind of tether the device and look at the file in a decrypted format. So if you want to hide the information from the user itself, you have to use some kind of encryption, and there are standard encryption APIs available, like you can use AES encryption 128-bit or 256 bits.
Great. So folks did kind of come back in that it seems like the percentage Apple takes for your app, if you charge for it, is 30%. So that's how they make their money on this. A lot of questions about cross-platform development. I mean, obviously, if you're building for a lot of different environments, that's kind of, I think, where you'd look at one of these Meet platforms that Ryan mentioned earlier, because that's certainly...
Yeah, Meet platforms are good for enterprise applications. Web apps can be good for cross-platform development as well. If you're developing native applications, though, let's say you want to develop an Android application, an iOS application, and a Windows Phone 7 native application, unless you use other SDKs, I'm not aware of too many cross-platform SDKs there that you can use, but it's not easy to develop those cross-platform. So the native app you're developing in iOS is an Objective-C application. The one you're developing for Android is a Java application. So they are not particularly easy to do cross-platform.
Yeah, Ryan, just would like to add a few things here. As far as hybrid application goes, that's what you would use for cross-platform application, and there are few frameworks which you should definitely go and check out. PhoneGap is one popular framework which I think Adobe acquired recently. That's very popular for developing hybrid apps. There's one more called Titanium, which we had tried some time back, I think last year. So things would have probably changed. So you should evaluate more such frameworks before you decide on one. But I think PhoneGap is something that I've definitely heard from multiple people as far as hybrid application development goes for cross-platform development.
Well, guys, we're kind of right up against our hour here. Sumeet, Ryan, thanks. It's always great to get the development team in touch with our customers and people who attend the series regularly. So I appreciate you guys spending an hour with us, sharing your knowledge. One thing we're going to be doing best practices for enabling Android 4.0 devices in 2 weeks. So, yeah, that's the ice cream sandwich release of Android. So I've got mine. I've got a Samsung Galaxy Nexus that I got last month. Or I'm sorry, back in December, I guess almost 2 months ago now. So it's definitely out there in the marketplace. And so we're going to talk about some best practices for how to enable those types of devices in the enterprise. Obviously, all of our webinars are recorded, and everybody on this webinar is going to get an email with a link that will be where we post the recording sometime tomorrow on our Master Center. When we end the webinar in a second, your browsers are going to get redirected to a link where you can take a free trial of MAS 360. So one of the great things about a cloud-based app is it's really easy to try. So if you're interested, give it a shot. You can actually get a fully functional MDM account up and running in 5 minutes, and you can get your devices enrolled in another 5 minutes and start learning. So if you've got some interest, please feel free to sign up for the free trial. You've got Sumeet and Ryan's email addresses up there. If you've got some questions, you may want to bang on one of them. And we'll certainly try. We didn't get to all the questions. We'll certainly try to answer all of them in the post where we'll have the recording tomorrow. So thanks again for your time. Ryan, Sumeet, thanks.
You're welcome.
Always a pleasure.
And see everybody again in 2 weeks.